Hi there, my name's Richard Watts. I'm Chief Exec of People Make It Work. We help cultural organisations to change and develop, and we've been doing that for the last 20 years. We work with about 160 cultural organisations across the UK, and they range in scale and art form, from some of our largest performing, visual and heritage organisations through to smaller unincorporated community organisations and individual practitioners. People Make It Work is 50 consultants who are cultural leaders in their own right. Most of them are either currently or previously leading some of our most well-known cultural institutions. And they work with us at People Make It Work to help organisations change and develop. Today, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about some insights, 3 insights that I've had over the last few weeks, 3 actions that you might take, and then I might close with a thought about something else that you might do that might be helpful for you and your organisation at this time. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was our own human responses to change. For people who are neurotypical, then that set of changes is quite predictable. For people who are not neurotypical, then I'd still expect them to experience a significant set of human responses and change-related dysfunction at this time. That means that you are experiencing those change-related dysfunctions at the moment, that the team that you're working with, the partner that you're living with, the kids that you're looking after, the parents that you're supporting, the friendship group, the organisation, the audiences, everybody is kind of going through a change-related dysfunction and probably a traumatic response. If you want to understand more about that, then there's a video a bit further down on this website. There's a link to where I'm talking about that in lots more detail. I really recommend you have a look at it. It's got some hints and tips about how to manage yourself and manage other people through that process. The second insight I wanted to share was to think a little bit about kind of calibrating and drawing our awareness to how we as organisations are responding during this change. David Micklem, also on this site, talks about sort of 3 phases of the change, with this kind of current period being the first phase. We've thought about that in terms of 5 actions that you might take across those 3 phases. So the first is to react, the second is to respond, the third is to reflect, the fourth is to reimagine, and the 5th is to reshape. We think that those are what we're all up to at the moment. If react is about closing buildings, saving cash flow, ensuring that staff and colleagues are safe. Respond is about creating new product, changing our processes and procedures to accommodate this current situation. And then I think reflect is about understanding a bit more about how we did that and taking a clear look at what's most likely to happen, and developing a range of scenarios for our organisation, or a range of scenarios of what might happen in the world. And then when we think about reimagine, I think we're applying those scenarios to our own organisation and looking at creative responses, how we're structured, how we're funded, how we're organised, how we're resourced, what we offer, how we connect. All of those things, I think, deserve reimagining at this time. And that takes us to our final stage of reshaping and implementing, once we're ready to do so, those reimagined ideas into concrete reality for our organisation, communities and staff teams. If you'd like to think more about the 5 R's, then again, a bit further down this page, you'll see some information about those tools that are emergent for us. We're developing them as we go along and sharing them as prototypes to hear what works and refine what needs to be improved. And then the third thing I wanted to talk about, I suppose, was about really, it's linked to that last point, it's about learning from our initial responses. So loads of the cultural organisations and leaders that I've been talking with over the last month, 6 weeks, have talked about how impressed they've been at how their organisations responded, how much clarity they've had, how much momentum, how much agency. And I think it's really worth us thinking about what conditions were required in order for that to happen, and how we could maintain those behaviours, those positive behaviours in our future organisation, even without the emergency scenario that we've just been listening and working through. So in the reflect phase of our tools, you'll find some more information about how to go about that in a structured fashion. But really we're thinking about what stopped us from having those great behaviours in the past. How could we implement ways of working, processes, procedures, culture in our future organisation that makes those positive behaviours more likely. So things like agency, really enabling the right people to take action. Things like clarity and authority, really setting out some parameters that people can act within. Things like collaboration, truly creating a single overarching narrative or priority for us all that enables us to move at pace. These are things that aren't linked to urgency and emergency situations, but have become less likely in our previous organisations. And I think we can do some really straightforward things to embed them in the future. So if I think about 3 actions, the first would be to have a look at that human response video and give care to pastoral care to colleagues, audiences, funders, landlords, other strategic partners, sector support organisations, our children. In our organisation, we've decided that we wanted to really support individuals through this process. So it takes us on to our second point, which is about really taking care of our own well-being so that people make it work. We've implemented for our associates and staff team a free coach in residence, a free therapist in residence, a free holistic practitioner, yoga practitioner in residence, and a free researcher in residence. And those 4 posts pay for by us and free for our associates and staff to use, are designed to enable people to get the support they need at these extraordinary times, to help them with their families, their children, their own reactions, to give them a space to reflect, and to help them to think about innovative solutions that might help us in the future. What's your package of support for your team and colleagues, and how are you encouraging them to really think about their own well-being? So that's my second action, and I think my third action is to have a think about your current priorities. So we've identified 5 at People Make It Work that we're helping organisations work on right now, and I suggest that you identify one of those 5 to start work on right now, or even identify different people in your leadership team to focus on each of them. The 5 that we've identified are creating a new flexible business plan fit for our times that protects cash flow, responds to uncertainty, and enables us to expand and contract both around potential changes to social behaviour and also changes to the supply of product. Creating new working practices for our virtual teams and relationships. I feel like we've started that with some urgent stuff, but sticking a laptop in a house and putting someone on a chair isn't the same as really working through those new practices and relationships for the future. Reimagining relationships with audiences and communities that reflect the new world. There's a lot of work to do there, isn't there, to really catch up with what audiences and communities will need from us going forward, and how we respond to that. They probably don't need, for instance, an infinite supply of digital content not made for digital that we're pumping out at the moment. While that's useful in the short run, I think we need to reimagine those relationships beyond that, don't you? Fourthly, exploring new income models and sources as secondary spend and ticket income disappears. That's a really crucial element for many of you. And finally, shaping our cultural offer to flex with a post-COVID or with COVID social landscape. So which of those 5 areas are your biggest priority at the moment? Action, one of those. We're developing tools right now to help you to explore those things in a structured fashion. If you'd like to help us do that, then get in touch. We do our best work in collaboration. And if all 5 of those things feel equally important, then make sure that you're doling them out to other people. It's astonishing how much each of us can do if we're solely committed to one area and bringing that back to the wider team. My final thought is, I suppose it's a slightly idiosyncratic one, which is about testing our denial thinking. I think it's really apparent to all of us that, and we know that this happens during traumatic situations, that we hold on for a kind of an illogical duration to some outmoded thoughts, lenses, and kind of paradigms. And so what can we do about that? Well, I suggest that we really consciously test our ideas and our parameters to see whether there's some there's a little bit of sort of denial thinking going on. So for instance, and the way I would do that is to identify a kind of key parameter. That might be something like that we're going to open as normal from July, or it might be something more practical, like we think that if we sat people every other row and every other seat, we could have a viable business. So what I'd say is go to evidence to test that key piece of thinking, that assumption. Look for all the concrete evidence that reinforces that idea, and look for all the concrete evidence that might challenge that idea, and tabulate that and have a conversation with your leadership team about all your current working assumptions and test which ones feel like they really stand up to that denial thinking test and which ones crumble under that pressure. Hopefully through that process, you'll identify some parameters that you do feel are robust, or some circumstances within which those parameters might be used. And that can help you to start to develop some scenario planning content. We're using that tool to help us think about the way that we're delivering and supporting organisations at the moment. And we're expecting that all of our work will be virtual for 2020. I don't suppose that's true, and I imagine we will end up meeting with some of you, but for the time being, it makes sense to orientate all of our business to that working parameter. And when you test that assumption, I think the evidence stacks up that it's not a bad way to be thinking. People Make It Work has a ton of resources on this website for you to use. We've also made a commitment that every cultural organisation and leader gets the professional support they need at this time, regardless of the ability to pay. And that means everyone, regardless of the scale of your organisation or the type of endeavour within the culture sector. So connect with us. We'll offer tailored one-to-one support to everyone from our associate network. You'll also see videos, daily surgeries with different experts every day, and tools that you can use with your team here on the website. So please use all of those. Thank you very much, and good luck to you all.